serious? They say people don't leave bad jobs, they leave bad bosses. What made you leave? I had a boss who would scream in my face so often. I started to strategize how I would handle it when she finally hauled off and hit me. She never did. But she did eventually lose her job after being accused of child abuse. I had a boss hit her boss and she kept her job. She got fired a few months later though for sheer incompetence. And this was a white collar trade association. Holy cow. I had a coworker who threw screaming hissy fits at our director and was never reprimanded. She and I were the only two of our job title in the building. She never did her share of the work. And I always had to pick up slack because people knew I was reasonable. So I quit. Hope they're still having fun with Ritter. I was 18 or 19 working my first job. He criticized my lipstick saying that it was an ugly color, recommending that I wore a bright red lip to go with my bright red uniform shirt. He didn't like my choice of all black shoes. He didn't like the way I mopped the floor, taking the mop from me to show me how to properly do it. He even told one of my coworkers that she couldn't wear a sports bra under her uniform. I quit a few days later. Sounds like a creep. I had been running the restaurant for weekend nights for 3 years. These were not easy shifts. 5 PM to 3 AM. Still, I was a night owl, and it was my pleasure. I took some days off and went to a hot spring with my now wife. Upon driving home I noticed my leg hurt and within 2 hours was in the hospital for an infection. That would take 3 antibiotics at once to deal with. I called in sick 3 days in advance. My AGM told me it was cool. Heal up. And that they would cover my shift. They did not. For my first infraction I was put on final warning and 1 step from being fired. After all the years of work, I put in 3 weeks notice the next day. Fuck you illegal pets. Upon driving home I noticed my leg hurt and within 2 hours was in the hospital for an infection. That would take 3 antibiotics at once to deal with. Off topic. But holy duck, warm water infections scare the shit out of me. Your story reminds me of a friend of mine who scratched her ankle on a bit of coral in the South Pacific on vacation and caught a flesh-eating bug either from the coral or from washing afterwards. She ended up needing surgical debridement literally all the way down to the bone and 6 months of various kinds of therapy to avoid losing her leg below the calf. She put pictures on Facebook because this was back before Facebook stopped allowing that sort of thing, and they were absolutely terrifying. She's a nurse, so she had detailed explanations, like you see, that color is this tissue and the pasty bit there is the bone and the crusty part is normal wound excretion apostrophe. Between the flesh-eating bacteria and brain amoebas, I'm quite happy avoiding swimming holes, unless they're cold water. For what it's worth I had lived in a very warm place all my life. Swam in tepid lakes regularly. Neither myself or anyone I know ever got an infection or amoeba. Statistically it's incredibly unlikely. Edit. Words on phones are hard. My manager hasn't been great pre-COVID, but as soon as our company was forced to shift to mostly WFH, she lost it. She demanded unpaid overtime and is of the mindset that WFH is always going to be less productive than working in office because she says she gets 1/4 of her own work done when WFH. She also volunteered our department as the pilot project to go back into the office when cases were at an all-time high, but she herself was not coming in. In addition, she has demanded higher standards and tighter deadlines amidst the pandemic and does not support us even when our clients are in the wrong. We have had a lot of our team members leave for better jobs recently and everyone is looking to do the same. I had a job where most of the company went WFH pre-COVID, but my boss won't let me. So every day I came into an empty office, but they turned off AC and stopped coffee service. So I would sit in the office and sweat. The funny thing was my boss was WFH 4 years before this. He was a big dick. I left after 6 months of that bullshit. Probably the worst boss I ever had was at a McDonald's. We had a younger manager for the first 10 or so months I was there. Then they decided to bring in a second manager from another store. For the first week or so he was fine, until one day one of the 16-year-old girls that usually works drive-thru was put on the grill for no reason. She got grease on her shirt and the manager said she looked like a pig and to clean it or go home. She left crying. The next day another underage kid asked to just get a drink of water after a 3-hour non-stop rush. The kid looked like he was about to pass out. The manager told him no, so he said he'd drink from the sink in the back. He told him if he did, that he would send him home. I lost my shit when I heard that. Basically told him to duck off and left. Never went back. I heard that a month later he was fired. One thing any young worker should learn is to stand up for themselves if there is an emergency. I've heard many stories of employees being denied a break after getting burned or something. If you burn your hand or you feel like passing out, don't ask for permission. If they deny you basic health procedures, there is a good case to sue the heck out of them. Hours discussing private matters about staff to other staff. She was a disgusting person in general anyway and many other things, but this was the final straw. As a nanny, it's weird when your boss is a mom with no actual experience in being a boss. The worst boss I worked for wasn't that bad when I first started working for her. Over the course of the year she kept adding more things for me to do. I wasn't just taking care of the baby, I became their maid too with no pay increase. Eventually it got even worse, and I was basically her personal assistant. She got a taste of power and completely abused it. As a young 19-year-old it was hard for me to see how bad the situation was. It wasn't an overpass thing. I was eventually fired. The day after I was fired she called me asking where I was. By that time the job was so bad. I did everything in that house, from taking care of the baby to hand washing the mom's delicates. She got me a uniform and would reprimand me if it wasn't kept well. Same with hair and makeup requirements. She was a couple weeks pregnant with baby Hash too and would suggest I become a wet nurse for them. After I was fired I never went back. This lady flipped out and showed up at my house. Why aren't you working? Apostrophe. You fired me. Apostrophe. Well, you need to come back right now. Apostrophe. Or what? You'll double fire me. Apostrophe. Patrick. You're fired. But I don't work here. Would you like a job starting now? Boy would I. You're fired. I'd kill it with my efficiency scores all quarter, but when the time came for raises I was given an impossible task. When I couldn't complete it, that was the reason cited for not giving me a raise. Our company grew and became more and more profitable because the jobs were getting bigger and bigger. And a lot of us would stay late and work overtime, but hardly anyone was getting raises. If they were, it was a cost of living raise being passed off as a genuine raise. So I figured I could take my skills elsewhere and changed careers. The client let slip how much they were paying for me. In 1 month they paid more than my annual salary. I asked my boss for a pay raise and was told there was just no money available. I said I'd give them 6 weeks to find the money and she laughed at me as I wasn't the type to give ultimatums. When I handed my notice in, after securing a better offer from another company, my boss's boss offered me a 50% raise to stay. It's so stupid how commonplace this has become in management. I can't count how many co-workers I've lost because they were asking for a raise for years, never got one, then get offered the raise they were asking for when they hand in their resignation. By that point, you've burnt any trust or goodwill they have for you, and your raise is most likely just matching the compensation they've been offered. I left Journeys because everyone except me came down with COVID and I was a new hire. But instead of finding people to come work and train me or shut the store down, they just said I had to do it all alone, so I left. I'm all for being thrown to the wolves if I have the knowledge to handle it, but not when I can't even do returns yet, lol. My boss was fine. The company was terrible. When I realized I didn't have a pension and could get one at a competitor, I booted. Being called into my manager's office to be coached because I missed 1 day of work in a 2-month time span to attend my aunt's funeral. The first thing the manager said was, I would have done the same thing. She then proceeded to have me sign paperwork instructing how to avoid absenteeism to put in my work record. That day I decided to note the heck out of there. 2 days off for the birth of my first child and a retweet the day I returned because my wife had been in labor too long. They fired her for being pregnant. That's probably illegal. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. If you enjoyed watching this video, leave your thoughts in the comments below.